morning and welcome to Straight Talk Vermont with Linda Joy Sullivan. Thank you, NEK-TV, for putting this wonderful show together. I am honored today to have a professional, renowned reporter, Christopher Roy, joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Good morning. We are going to be kicking off a series of interviews with reporters and those who write about the news and edit the news. And today I am really thrilled to have Chris with us. Chris has been doing work in this area for a long, long time. Yes. And we are going to get it straight. So welcome.
Thanks for having me.
I am thrilled. So Chris, tell me, and is it okay if I say Chris?
Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about your background, how you got started, and then one of the best stories that had an impact on your career.
Okay. So I started in 1991, pretty much of November, December of 1991, when I wrote kind of an informational piece on amateur radio. And then the Newport Daily at the time was looking for reporters, and I applied, and I was hired as a freelancer, and pretty much the rest is history.
Wow. So did you always just work for that paper, or did you work for any other papers?
I mostly freelance for the Newport Daily, but I did some freelance work for the Caledonian Record.
Okay.
And I was also subcontracted to do some photojournalism for a paper in Connecticut when there was a New England Babe Ruth tournament up here, New England wide tournament up in this area.
That's exciting.
Yes.
Yeah. So when you were freelancing, how did your assignments come out? Did you choose your assignments? Were they given to you by the paper? Was it a blend?
It was pretty much a blend. You know, a lot of people have sent me information and said, well, this is going on, this is going on. Things I picked up at the local coffee shop, or they would assign me something if they needed somebody else to cover something that they didn't have the bodies for.
Local coffee shops, that's always a fun place to get information.
Absolutely.
So when you go into these local coffee shops, are people, like, do they run up to you? Like, there he is, it's exciting, you know? Or is it more, do they sit back and go, oh, will he come to me? I have all the secret news to tell him. Like, did you develop almost a constituency base? You know, how did that work?
I did. I developed people who trust me as a journalist, and they said, hey, you might want to look into this, or this particular event is happening. Then I would usually follow up on it.
You hit the word trust.
Yes.
How does a reporter, because, you know, like lawyers, reporters have that same, oh, reporter, ooh, lawyer, you know. So how do you develop trust with the public in your writing? And you have done that. I can attest to that. So how did you actually develop that as a young writer starting out? How did you develop that trust?
Oh, it takes time. Some people are quite conservative who they talk to, then you do develop that trust. Just by being honest and by being fair, not taking sides. That's a really big thing, is to be non-biased.
Okay.
You know that you want to ask the tough questions without the feel that you're being pushed in one direction or another, and sometimes you don't make friends with that.
So asking tough questions doesn't necessarily mean you're trying to target somebody. It just means you're trying to open up more information to get to the truth of a story, if one actually exists, right?
Exactly. It's not that I'm trying to throw anybody under the bus or whatever, but, you know, especially with political figures, that they need to be held accountable. And that's pretty much up to journalists to make sure that they are held accountable in a fair and non-biased way.
Right. Okay. So that's really interesting. So political figures, they of course are out there, and accountability is at the ballot box.
Yes.
So the press can actually influence what happens at the ballot box. And sometimes people think just because there are a lot of stories about a political figure that that's a bad thing. And that's not true. It just means that they're out there at a time of stories. So how do you actually decide which political figure to have a story about?
Good question. I think it really depends on what's going on, what the topic is. And just again, because I'm interviewing that political person or that person of prestige or whatever the case may be, doesn't mean that is how I feel about the person or that I like the person or dislike the person. And that has to be really clear that just because I give a political person difficult questions, it's not because I'm trying to, again, toss them under the bus. It's up to the public to decide how they want to vote or how they want to proceed one way or the other.
So I know in my career I always proceed with skepticism, which is, I believe, appropriate. Okay,
Sure.
It's not a target; it's just the way you approach things, which gives you more of that independence. Is that how you might proceed, with a mindset of skepticism on anybody?
Well, I think as I said, I think it's important to ask the difficult questions and, and I think how we speak as humans or as a population is important.
Yeah.
A lot of people refer to the former Spates block down here as the whole, as the pit. And that is, people can look at it that way if they want, but that is not maybe an appropriate way to call it if folks want development down there. You're not going to be able to advertise giant pit facility in Newport, but if you call it an opportunity,
But it's the only one.
but if you call it an opportunity lot or a building lot, I think that'll be a good way to market it once the lot becomes available from the receiver.
Right, and that's actually something that's not as far away as people think. I mean, the receiver has always been out there open. It's just a matter of getting the appropriate developer with the appropriate plan that fits for a small city like Newport.
Right.
So, and I'm from Manhattan, and I see these types of vacancies every day when you walk down the streets. It's every corner there's something like this, so it's not as shocking, but because we're such a small area, it's more shocking. And this, of course, came with a history in the news, which was an entirely different political subject. And so, of course, it is the corner of that story always going to happen. But I don't think, as you said, maybe redefining the name, okay? I've always heard it as the whole, and to me that doesn't really mean it's like a sinking hole. It just means that it's already been knocked down so it could be developed, which is a good thing.
Right.
So there's always good opportunities that come out of what people, words that are chosen, I mean, I'm in reporters who don't use the flaming tongue of fire.
Right.
Okay. But you're absolutely right. So tell me though, you end up with sources.
Yep.
And I'm really interested in what that means. Like, if somebody wants to be a source, they can pick up the phone and say, hey, here it is. But then what about anonymous sources? Do they have protections, or is it all trust?
I think it depends on the journalist. To me, they have protection, and I think that's very important to build that trust, because people have to trust you, and without revealing who they are. And I've received numerous anonymous tips over the years, and probably 98% of the time they came out to be true.
So if I called you up and I said, hi, this is my name and I've got this story or this information for you, but I really would like you not to reveal who I am.
Yep.
Does that agreement vest with you as the reporter or with you and the paper you work for?
Personally, I think it's for both. And a reporter should be willing to keep their sources protected at all costs, even if it means being held.
Okay, so if I were, say, you were submitting your stories to A, B, or C papers, wherever, and I'm the editor, can I demand that source? Do you have the right to say no, and will the editor respect that?
I think it depends on the relationship between the reporter and the editor.
Okay.
And the management. The reporter should be able to trust his or her management that they have this tip from this particular person. Mm-hmm. Well, who is it? And then I think it depends on the relationship between the reporter and the management team. And the management team should hold that information protected.
Right. So, because this I think is important, because reporters rely on sources, of course.
Of course.
And that is the relationship between the reporter and a source. And, that source needs to understand that no matter what the management says, that the reporter will keep that bond and keep that trust in saying no.
Yep.
Right? Even if it means the story is not going to go to print. But I mean, the management has that authority.
Of course.
And that's okay, that's their job. But have you found that ever to happen anywhere, not just with you, maybe with other reporters that you know, where management has pretty much said to them, if you don't reveal your sources, we're not publishing your stories?
I haven't ran into that.
Okay.
I think it probably does happen.
Okay, but less so than the norm.
I haven't seen it personally, but I'm sure it does.
Right. So I guess it's important for the source and the reporter, and that's what builds your reputation, is that you're trustworthy.
Yes.
Now, like, reporters are allowed to tape. I mean, we're allowed to tape, et cetera. But so when you go out there and you tell a source that you are taping them, if you even tell them, or
Right.
if the reporter says, say the source says it's off the record, do you respect that and not tape?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So if somebody says it's off the record and you get this information, how are you legally allowed to follow up on that information?
I think it depends on what it is.
Okay.
If you know of a particular incident that's going on, and you call the person at the top for that, or the media contact, whoever, whatever it is, and I have this tip that this incident happened or is going to happen. Can you give me some information? And they may ask, well, I really can't tell you that it was given to me as a tip. And hopefully, if the person you're talking to is professional, I guess, for lack of a better word, that they will honor that, and say, okay, fine.
Have you found a difference between your reporting when you're doing civil reporting versus criminal reporting? Do you ever feel that you've uncovered something that maybe you do need to discuss with law enforcement, or are you not allowed to do that?
I don't know that I've ever come across that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just curious because that rises to a different level, and there's still the ethics and the responsibility
Right.
that you take on, and that, or if you just report it, I guess, then it's out there. So law enforcement could follow through if they so choose.
Sure.
Yeah. So tell me about a story that had an impact on who you've become as a reporter.
Oh boy, there's so many.
We've got plenty of time.
Right? I don't know that there's any particular story. I know there's stories that stick out in my mind.
Okay.
A few that I probably don't want to revisit because it was so terrible.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, because it was.
Yeah.
It had a terrible outcome.
Sure.
But I think some of the most memorable things are covering the political stories or the top figureheads who visit New England.
Okay.
I've covered Vice President Dick Cheney when he was in Vermont.
Okay.
And an unexpected thing happened, at least for the journalist, that it was over at the Burlington airport. And a couple hours before the event, they said, okay, guys, get on the bus. we're going over to the National Guard side to meet with the troops. And I was in a bus. There were actually two buses, or two vans, driven by Secret Service. And I was driving through Burlington on an unmarked bus with national media sitting next to me, driven by the Secret Service.
That's exciting.
It is. Then I was on the close-off portion of the National Guard runway, again with national media, and big media names.
Right. So, did you ever want to leave Vermont and go, say, D.C. or out of the country and get into the battlegrounds? Was that ever something you wanted to do, even when you were younger? I mean, usually we want to do it for an hour and a half, and then we get a reality check.
I don't know so far as in a war zone type situation, if that's what you're speaking of.
Sure, I'm speaking of everything here. We're talking straight at anything.
Oh, sure. I don't think so. But sure, I would. I think most reporters would like to, move to a bigger area and cover, more popular things.
Right. So, would D.C. be an area that you would have liked to go? Young lawyers want to be judges.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, right.
Oh, sure. I think so.
Have you ever gone there and watched any stories that maybe you reported here about?
I have not.
That would be exciting to do, right?
Yes.
And now I would think in the new change of the administration, there could be a lot of opportunity for that. Then as a freelancer, if a paper asked you to cover something like that, would you be willing to do that?
Oh, sure, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're still there as the real full-fledged journalist. You're open to covering stories that the public needs to hear.
Yes.
Wow, that's exciting. So tell me, a real story, another one, without going into the sad or the good, the bad. Mm-hmm. But, the one that you just told me is exciting, okay? Yep. Was there a story that maybe you covered that you were following leads and then realized that after you published it, there was more information that came out and you wanted to write that side of it and you were allowed or weren't allowed to do so?
Oh, I'm sure there was. I can't think of anything off the top of my head right now. There's a lot of times always follow-up, whether it's with a governance board of a community,
okay,
or a school board, or there's usually always more than one side of the story. Maybe not every time, but many times.
So what's your favorite type of coverage? As a reporter, if you had to pick, what area would you like? Is it politics? Is that, what do you like to cover?
Oh, sure. Politics, spot news, whether it's, a big fire or, just, almost anything can become a news story.
That's right.
And it doesn't have to be the gruesome stuff. Sometimes it's the little kids selling lemonade on the street corner to raise money to buy a new baseball mitt or something. And there's always a story out there. You just have to look for it. And
you have to be able to write it.
Yes.
So you sit down. You never get writer's block.
No. No.
You don't have time. The pressure's on. You have a deadline. How did you learn, or how did you develop the ability to work under deadlines?
Time management.
Time management. That's interesting. I never would have thought that would have been the answer. Wow, time management. Not fear.
No.
Fear of not getting it done.
Oh, there's always that. There's always that.
So tell me about time management in meeting deadlines.
Well, you just have to look at your caseload, your workload that day, and do I want to break up a story into multiple sections and multiple stories?
Oh.
I covered the city council for years. Mm-hmm. As you know.
Right, I met you there.
Right?
Right. Let's talk about that. No,
right? But there might be 2 or 3 different topics, and the city council is pondering increasing the water and sewer rates. That's obviously been a big issue, for years.
Right.
And, why is that? And Are they losing money? Why are they losing money? Or if they need a new widget, why do they, the city needs a new widget. Why do they need that new widget? Is it an addition? Is it one that's worn out? Can they make do with the current widget? If not, why not? And what's going to happen with the old widget? Is it going to be sold? Is it going to be traded in? Is it going to be disposed of?
Right. Right. So all of those things, and every single area that you just discussed could be a story unto itself.
Absolutely.
Because how is that widget going to be disposed of? Was there already an arrangement?
Right.
Right? I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly.
everything can open up into a different path, which leads you to a different story. But going into your deadlines and your time management, so you have your, say, weekly stories or whatever you have on your daily batch. All of a sudden, something comes in. You have a deadline on story A, and then a huge story comes in, and we want Chris Roy on it. So what happens? Do you assign your other story to somebody else, or do you own them both?
I don't have the power to ask somebody else to do it. That's above my current leadership. You can ask for help. You can break away from it. You can ask the person you write in for at the time, do you want me to continue working on this story, or do you want me to go on this break-in story? And I think it might depend what it is, where it is, and how long it's going to take.
Okay. So then there are powers that be that could help you with those decision-making.
Exactly.
Okay. So it's not only on you to put more pressure on you. And so let's say you get the two stories going, right? Because now you have two typewriters,
Right.
two computer screens, right? You're going back and forth, and your deadline's coming up on both, right? What is it? What's the power that makes it happen in you? How do you find it inside yourself to say, I'm good with this story?
I don't know that you're ever perfectly happy with it.
Okay.
Because I think that's maybe a tad of arrogance. But you have to get to a point where you know if you have enough information or not enough information. And again, we're going back to it depends what it is and the importance of it.
So you'd have to really also learn to let it go.
Yes.
And that's a tough one.
Of course it is,
right?
yes.
Because you let it go, but it lives in your head, right? And then you're keeping it alive in you. Does that give you the opportunity to say, you know what, I shouldn't have let this one go, I'm coming back? Or do you just still let it go?
I think again, it depends.
Tough one, yeah.
It depends what it is and the importance of it.
Have you ever watched other reporters, of course, who write,
Yep.
and then say, oh no, that story is not the angle I would have written about it, and taken that story and wrote your own angle that you have, of course, evidence for? Taken a different position.
Sure, I can't think of a particular instance, but sure, I've seen stories and yeah, I think you really missed the mark, or you really missed the point on this particular topic, or this should have been addressed, but it wasn't.
So you can actually get stories from other reporters, like you do read other reporters, right? Of course. So I mean, that's what we do in our field. You do it. You
Right.
look at your competition. You look at your base. Do you also collaborate with other reporters? Have you ever done joint stories?
You mean it's competing paper? You mean competing media outlets, or do you
Yes.
mean within?
Well, both.
I think within. Sure, we discuss stories and we gather information together. I think probably there are competitors. I don't know that really has happened too much, because you always want to be the number one. I mean, I know it's not,
Sure.
because
Of course.
in this business you want to be number one. You don't want to get beat.
Well, that also goes to integrity too, because you want to be number one to establish the fact that you are doing a good job
Right.
and doing real reporting. And that's what the people want. The people want real reporting. But what does that mean, real reporting? I mean, to you, what does it mean?
I think gathering all the facts, as many of the facts you can, and getting them straight. You know, journalists are humans, and we make mistakes, and you know, we get our hands slapped, and we feel bad about it, then move on.
Right. So let's say you get your hands slapped, right? I mean, we're used to that, right? I mean, I do that every day. Right? What about retractions? When you do a retraction, is it usually it's just a retraction of a word or a sentence or something? It's usually not a retraction of an entire story.
Right.
Have you ever had a retraction of an entire story?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't remember any of yours that would be a retraction of an entire story, more of maybe an update with a different viewpoint.
An update with a different viewpoint, and sometimes people don't like what was printed,
Wow.
but it's, you know, a lot of the times, and 99% of the times, it's the truth. Just because you don't like it doesn't mean it's not the truth.
Right. So did you ever cover any of the events up at the State House throughout your career?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
One of them was, I think, it's only been a few times, but when they would talk about closing the PSAP at the Derby Barracks.
Sure.
Because a lot of the people loved their jobs, because it was during consolidation of the 911 answering points.
Right.
There was a lot of testimony. A lot of people who worked there were very passionate about it, very passionate about the people they serve, very passionate about their jobs.
So when you went up there, it's an entirely different environment to go to the local council meetings across Orleans County, or to go up to the State House, where it is 24/7.
Right.
Testimony, something going on, deals being cut in the hallways, in the cafeteria, over at the Capitol,
Sure.
right? And so, did you ever go to any of those, let's say, off-site, you know, go and have a cup of coffee and hear what was going on and start to speak to some of the deal makers, and were they open to speaking to you?
I haven't.
I would have been.
I haven't done that a lot because I haven't had the opportunity to cover Montpelier a lot, directly cover Montpelier. But to speak to deal makers, I don't think so, because I just didn't have the opportunity.
Okay, because I know there's a lot going on up there now. I mean, we've got, you know, vetoes of the budget adjustment.
Right.
We've got vetoes of the second budget adjustment. And, you know, vetoes are, in my mind, a good balanced vehicle that belongs there. It's not like a four-letter word as like, oh my God, the veto. You know, the vetoes are good, in my mind. Very important tool.
Right.
Of course, you know, there's going to be politicizing about it, but that's the political environment. But it has nothing to do with the actual tool that's necessary to keep balance across the three, you know, branches of government.
Right.
So are you following anything on that?
I haven't been in the last month or so because I've had so many things going on. But yeah, journalists should really keep track of what's going on, not only in his or her neighborhood, but what's going on statewide and national,
Right.
and international for some point.
Have you been following at all the Haskell Library situation?
I have.
Oh,
Yep.
You want to talk about that? Are you able to talk a little bit about that? Just, you know, what do you think's going on, or how it was approached, or how maybe you would have wrote the story?
Oh, I did write one of the stories.
Tell me about it.
And the library has came up with a solution that they're going to have a door on the Canadian side for folks on the Canadian side of the border may enter and exit the library without having to go through the port of entry.
Right. So that happens. They come in, and this library cards or no library cards are going on. So they come in, they came up with a solution.
Yep.
And was that always available? Wasn't that always available to be able to come in through that door anyway?
I'm not so sure about that.
Okay.
And I think probably most people like to use the front door anyway, but that opportunity may not be available, from my understanding.
Right.
May not be available to everybody who doesn't want, especially if they don't want to cross the border, if they can't cross the border.
Right. So that kind of was resolved. Situation.
I believe so.
Pretty much.
I believe so. I can't speak on behalf of the library.
No, of course, but I'm
Right.
saying they came up with a solution quickly. They were not out to cause any further distractions or harm. They
No.
wanted to really come up with a solution. They put their heads together, and they did.
Yep.
And so that's good. So what other stories about like that or down here are you covering, since you're not up in Montpelier but here? That's kind of an interesting, say within the new administration going on. Have you covered any more of those, or?
I haven't a lot because I stepped back from being a staff reporter last fall for another job.
Right.
Unfortunately, I got laid off through the government cuts. Mm-hmm. So I'm basically just freelancing now, and I'm trying to get back into it and get more steady work.
Sure, and let's talk about that.
Okay.
Okay, so you took a job, and good for you. It's always new horizons. Okay, unfortunately, there were cutbacks, but it doesn't stop your reporter expertise.
No,
and
not
it
at all.
doesn't stop the fact that you are freelancing and that you should cover stories. So are you going to start to look at stories? Because usually the reporter gets assigned a story, that's the way. But what if you want to take more control? What if you want to write these stories and then contact the papers and say, I have the story. I've started, here's my idea. Would you like me to work this story for you? Is that something that you can do?
Oh, sure. Oh, sure. It used to be, I was told by, when I first started out, you're freelancing, write a story and call the papers. What do you bid?
Right.
I have this story. What will you pay me for it? Then take the highest bidder.
Okay. That's kind of like the Superman Cub reporter Jimmy, right? Didn't they do that, right? So that's good, though, because then you're opening up a story to more than one newspaper.
Right.
And then they are saying, oh, you know what? We want to cover this story. And do we want to just use somebody inside, or do we want somebody who's really focused on getting the facts and has obviously information and has already started to do the research? So why not? So are you going to do that a little bit more expanded? Are you going to now say, I have a story up at Montpelier, I have a story in Newport, I have a story Glover, in all the different areas in Orleans County? Or are you just still going to stay focused on the ones that are just assigned to you?
I can do both.
You can do both.
I'll certainly do both. And
Right. And I think people should know that, because
Right.
I think there's also an attitude of, well, we don't want to cross the lines and say this person writes for one paper as a freelancer, so we shouldn't reach out. That type of competition, I believe, is not healthy.
No.
I think a reporter who's freelancing is exactly that. They're a professional freelance reporter.
Oh, sure.
And they've got good stories. And get it out there to all the papers and let the highest bidder do it. That's the purpose of being a freelance reporter. So do you have to reopen your connections as a freelance reporter? Because I'm really glad you're on the show so we can get this information out there. Is that something that you need to do? How do you do that, other than this type of publicity?
Sure. I think it's important to keep your connections open. Always keep them, never let them close. Because a lot of us know each other, or we know each other by name, by byline anyway.
By byline.
Yes.
That's okay. That's my next question.
Okay.
How do you come up with your bylines?
Well,
How do you come up with it?
Typically it's your name, and if you're freelancing, it's special to this particular publication, or news correspondent to this particular publication.
Right.
And if you're on staff, then you put, staff reporter.
Staff reporter.
Or staff reporters, or at least should be bound to write and just for that publication.
Right. So here's another question. Are there any type of governing authorities over reporters? So like CPAs have regulatory boards, lawyers have regulatory boards, engineers, et cetera, and licensed professionals. But reporters, is there an organization that helps you with ethics, a group that meets or that you can belong to nationally? How does that work?
Oh, sure. There's state organizations like the Vermont Press Association.
Okay.
That you can call up and say I have this particular issue, or national organizations for photographers. There's always somebody to reach out to, or even peers who have seniority. I have several peers who are journalists and professors.
Okay.
And they're well known in the state in New England, and I can call up and say, I have this issue. What do you think? What do you advise? And a lot of times they'll say, give me the best thought.
Okay, so you have that professional peer group that you can reach out to. Do you use that peer group like on ethical issues, independence questions, source questions? Why might you reach out to them?
Just for another set of eyes, just some more thoughts. Again, especially if somebody has been doing that for a long time.
Okay.
Seniority is really important.
Have you ever thought about teaching adjunct reporting?
I haven't.
Why not?
Because I want to be in the field. I don't want to be in a classroom. I want to be in the battle zone, so to speak.
But going in as an adjunct doesn't take you out of the battle zone. Going in as an adjunct, you could do one class.
Right.
And then get your group out there as well and tell them how to get out into the battleground as well. Because, once you hit certain levels, you want to give back, right? So you want to get our younger generation. I mean, they're so enthusiastic. They have pipe dreams or dreams, right? And so how do they learn other than just from an academic, unless they have the opportunity for maybe one class to speak to a real reporter?
Well, hopefully that journalism classes that they take are being taught by real reporters and not by somebody who's just teaching the class because the school needed somebody to teach the class.
Right.
Somebody with experience.
But sometimes they need a guest speaker.
Oh, sure.
So would you do that? Would
sure.
you do guest speaking? That's what I meant. I didn't mean like go and be a professor. I meant like,
okay.
Would you go in and be a guest speaker in a journalism class? Because that's so important for somebody who's been out there and touched it. And the questions I'm asking you, I'm sure they have the same questions, of probably even more detailed questions.
Right.
So that could be something as well that's important not only for yourself, okay, but also for the up and coming generation.
Oh, absolutely. And sometimes it's good to a brainstorm. You have a think tank,
Right.
And discuss different ideas and thoughts of what's going on, and how should this be covered? Well, did you think of that? Like, no, I didn't. No, I didn't. That's a good point. Let's pursue that.
Good. So if you are choosing a story and you are going to tell let's say, whatever paper you're already been promised, hey, go out and give me 3 stories.
Right.
You choose the story. Do you look at the style of stories that are published usually by that paper, or do you go with stories that you believe the public wants to hear?
Oh, both.
Both. So how do you convince the editor that the story that might be a little bit more controversial than a paper's usually open to covering, that it's a good idea?
I think you just have to speak to the editor and why you think it's an important story and how it affects the readers. And I think really that's the biggest thing, is how it affects the community. And that's what people should be concerned about. How does this affect me? And does it affect me? Again, we go back to the water and sewer rates.
Right.
water and sewer rates affects every person in the city, because even if people don't own property, they probably rent, and if the water and sewer rates go up X amount, then the landlord probably is not going to eat that increase. They're going to pass it on to their tenants the next time they renew their lease.
And let's talk about, if you're okay to talk a little bit about the water and sewer rates, because you've covered some of those stories.
I covered, yeah, I did cover. I'll answer what I can. I don't know if I can answer a lot.
No, of course. But I'm saying you covered the stories, and you've been here for a long time. So you saw the history and the different reasons for rates not to be raised, whether they were political, whether they were not on our agenda today,
Right.
or whether, an election was coming up, so we don't want to raise the rates this round, whatever the reasons were. But now it's come to the head.
Yeah.
So how do you go in there and say to cities or towns, well, you don't say it, but I'm saying, but how do you assess the fact that the people inside who are working on this, who should be monitoring this, okay, are they qualified?
I think it depends on every particular situation.
Mm-hmm. So, but I'm saying, like, you'll go into a town, and it's like it's not only the select board or the council who are they're stuck with the situation, right? But it's internally the people who actually work, town managers,
Right.
CEOs, whatever. They are the ones there who need to understand the numbers.
Right.
They need to have good records. Do you ever find that by just going in with good faith, just because you just want to know, is there going to be a rate and what is it in a raise? Do you ever find that, oh, well, you know what? Another story has come out of this.
Oh, sure.
You do.
Oh, sure. The city might decide to raise the rates by X amount,
Right.
and they need to have this extra revenue to supply the funding for another project or some widget.
Right.
And what is that widget? Is it a new widget, or is it replacing something? The arsenic treatment plant was
Right.
was a big issue for a while, and everything costs money, right? And nobody wants to pay more money, but the funding for this particular widget has to come from someplace. Is it going to come from local taxpayers? Is it going to come from state? Is it going to come from federal? A combination of both.
Right.
And I think that all has to be weighed.
And so, and you're absolutely right. And then, is there a correlation from the source of the funds to what the project really is? Or once that money comes in, if it's not really restricted money, okay, it can be used for anything, right?
Right.
And so that can turn into another story, right? And sometimes it's questionable transparency, and you never know that if it's not brought out, say, at your council meetings. Or do you sniff?
I think it depends what it is.
Uh-huh.
A lot of times it does come out at council meetings, or somebody will call me and say, hey, we paid for this widget, but now the money is being used towards another widget.
Right.
And then it's up to the reporter to find out if it's true, why the money went for this other widget. There's a lot of questions that need to be answered.
So what are some of the vehicles for you to get this information? You call people, public records requests, and what is the most difficult one to use?
I think it depends. You call your management, and they're always very open. At least they've always been very open to me. You can ask for public records requests. Sometimes you have to ask public records requests. Different sources. Maybe look at, because I don't live in the city, maybe look at people's water bills and the past water bills, and has it gone up? Has it gone down? Most of the time it probably won't go down, but maybe. And just try to figure out why it's happening. Again, because nobody wants to see their water rates increase or the utility bill increase. You know, whether it's water, sewer, electricity.
Right, and there's a difference between the businesses and the citizens individually.
Right.
And sometimes you have housing that has more than one citizen living in it. So there's going to be always an extraordinary circumstance or something that's not equal across the board.
Right.
And so if you ask for public records, let's say you used a public records request, there are deadlines for the towns or cities to turn those public records requests over. Have you ever got resistance?
No.
Okay, so everybody has been following the law.
Absolutely.
Pretty much.
Oh, absolutely.
Which is good. I mean, that's good to know, right? And sometimes they will give you records that have redacted information. And redacted information doesn't mean it's something wrong. I mean,
No.
it might be somebody's social security number.
Absolutely.
It might be, right. And so it might be personal identifiers, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're hiding something, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And so when you get this information and you sit there and you go, how do I, as a reporter, how do I not go down a rabbit hole, right? Because you're saying, this is where I was focused on my story, but now I've got all this information and I'm not quite sure if I'm smelling something where I
Right.
should go. So how do you when do you know you're not going down the rabbit hole?
I think you have to study the information, maybe talk to the folks again who provided it, talk to your management team, and talk to your peers. And hey, look, let's look at this. This information is redacted. Let's have a conversation amongst us to see if this is a story or if it's redacted just because, as you said, it's personal information, personal identifiers.
Right. So now I'm going to take you back to when you were younger. I feel like I'm hypnotizing you. I'm going to take you back.
Can I go back to being younger?
You are young already. And so when you were going to school, did you know you wanted to be a reporter? When did you know?
I think it just happened as I explained to you at the top of the program. But I will say that because I was disabled, I couldn't play a lot of the kickball sports at recess in probably third or fourth grade. But I would watch on the sidelines and pretended that I was a reporter reporting on the game.
Oh, wow, that is so cool.
And I had no idea years later that's what I would be doing. Maybe not sports, but a reporter.
Oh, my goodness. Like, did you sit there with, like, the thing on your arm and pretend, like, in
No,
your
just
mind, in your mind?
Yeah, exactly.
I love that mind game.
Yeah.
We still play them, I think, right?
Oh.
I love them. I love them. That's awesome. Okay, so you did that. You were young. Okay, you've been doing this since you're in grade school. Okay, and then you come out and you decide, I'm not going to be, win the chess championship. I'm going to be a reporter.
Right.
Okay, so it's really like if it were me, they would say she's nosy. Okay, but because you're out there, like you have to have that nosy quality, right? You have to want like an audit sniffer, a forensic, follow the money.
Right.
Did that sort of become part of who you were?
I'm not so sure.
You're a better person than me. I mean, I know for me, because I do so much forensic work,
Right.
get in there and you're like, okay, this is what you've got. This is the evidence. When do you not go down the rabbit holes? And even if they're something that you could prove, is there a cost benefit to it? But you don't have that as a reporter. So you're not dealing with a cost benefit relationship.
Well,
Or are you?
no, but define cost.
So,
I also look at cost as time.
Exactly. Right.
You know,
right. And that's right. And as time. So I'm looking at definitely from a time standard, but I'm looking at it more as like if I'm a receiver and I'm going in there, what's the cost to the creditors for this? Will it be like, hooray, look what I found? And then it's 10 years of a litigation that's never going to happen or will be settled? Is it worth it to the creditors? So I'm looking at a dollar value cost as well, which of course includes human capital, but I'm also looking at an expenditure. So for you, you're looking at the human factor more so, right?
I think so. And do folks want to know this? Probably. And you put as much effort as you can, but it comes to a point that you don't want to end up at a dead end and realize you just spent a month working on the story when there is no story.
Right. So have you ever, since fourth grade and up, okay, have you ever gotten, say, a story, and I'm going to say political figures because you mentioned that you did that a lot, where you had to write a story that was almost heartbreaking, and
Yes.
did that affect you?
Yes.
Tell us.
Again, I don't want to get into
You don't
it because
have to-
it's gonna.
Don't identify anybody.
Right, and that's why I'm hesitating.
So could you tell us not then about the story itself, but could you tell us about the situation that got you to get that story?
A lot of times for me, it's spot news or breaking news that ends up being a fatality or somebody seriously getting injured. And that's why I don't want to go into particular
No,
details.
that's okay.
Yeah.
That's quite all right. I just, but it affects you.
Of course it does.
And so as a reporter, how do you debrief?
Sometimes you don't.
You don't.
At the end of the day, you try to turn off, and a lot of times you can't turn off, but you just, I don't want to say let it go, but step back.
And then the next time that story, that type of story comes up, are there triggers?
Yes.
So in order to stay healthy, because reporters see tragedies. I mean, it is what it
Absolutely.
is. And probably more so than the average human being, right?
Absolutely.
And so you're also seeing tragedies, people you know, people you could know. And of course it's going to affect you as an individual because you're so compassionate and, you're there. And, and people do respect you and there is that trust that you've developed.
Yes.
It's important for you to stay healthy. So throw away all the reporting now and tell me what your favorite thing to do is, and it better be you saying karaoke or
Sing karaoke, that's one. But that's an interesting point because sometimes the songs that are sang at karaoke brings back memories to an incident. And I'm not going to get into details, but one particular song in particular brings back memories of an incident.
Sure. And so you're there thinking, okay, this is an outlet. I'm just going to be a free spirit and I'm going to not focus on anything. And the very first song you got, you're brought right back.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's almost like, I broke up with my boyfriend or girlfriend, and then here's that love song, and you just sing it over and over and over and over again. But now you're thrown in, and it's like you're out there. Let's say it was a karaoke song, but you're out there with the public. How do you not show them? Because karaoke is supposed to be fun, right? Yeah.
Sometimes you do.
Yeah, and sometimes you can just break down. So how did you get into karaoke?
I don't remember.
It comes with a script.
I just went one night. They were having karaoke at a club or at a restaurant heading out of Coventry.
Okay.
And then I got to know the people who were in charge of the karaoke, this particular person. And I'm just a follower of the company.
Wow. But you have fun.
Yes.
You totally have fun. I mean, you're brave to do that. I mean, I could never. In fact, I would be the person, probably the only person who they'd throw eggs at during karaoke. They'd say, sit down. Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to get out of here.
Right?
But good for you.
See ya.
Yeah, right, exactly. I would wait for that cane to be pulling me off the...
Right, tomatoes.
Yeah, tomatoes, yeah. So now tell me, okay, give me whatever you'd like to say to our public now so we can close it up. And I can't thank you enough. This has been so informative.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
But tell us, what do you want this episode to have said to our public from you?
I think people need to understand that reporters are human too. We make mistakes. We're human. We have emotions, and sometimes we cover things that we don't necessarily enjoy covering, but it needs to be done. I guess somebody needs to do it.
Right. So I do have one final question for you.
Okay.
I knew you when I was a legislator as Scoop.
Yes.
How'd you get that name?
The Newport Fire Department.
Okay, tell us about it. How'd they give it to you?
I don't really remember. They just started calling me Scoop because I was on the scenes, and it just happened. It just stuck.
Well, you made it all the way up to Montpelier because I remember you as Scoop. Well, I want everybody here to know that this has been, for me, a really informative, straight Talk Vermont. And I want to thank Christopher Roy, a journalist with integrity and who's been out there with such experience, for coming on today. And I hope you'll come back.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Definitely. Okay, and so it's Straight Talk Vermont with Lindsay Joy Sullivan, and this is just one episode where we get it straight. Thank you.